What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our weekly course breakdown. This time, we've got ourselves the WGC Dell Match Play, which is one of my favorite weeks of the year, and unfortunately, this is the last time we're going to see this format on tour, at least until they make it up again for maybe the 2024 season. We'll have to see, but an absolute rock star of a field and a golf course that's really a star of its own in Austin Country Club. It's a shorter track, a Pete Dye specialty that has got some elevation changes to it, some greens that are devilish, and overall is the perfect style of venue for match play and for fireworks, particularly there on the back nine. So if you're looking for excitement, you've definitely found yourself the right event. And in this video, going to break down everything you need to know about Austin Country Club. We'll go through some of the details, make sure we're on the same page, go hole by hole, showing you a few of the shots that these players are going to be facing, and then at the end, give you a few of my key stats and comp courses around the PGA Tour that I'm using to identify my top plays. Now, it's worth noting that a match play format is especially volatile, but looking at course fit, looking at some of the recent history, or especially course history around Austin Country Club, has proven to be especially helpful over the years. So whether it's a local kind of guy like Scotty Scheffler, who of course played a ton of rounds here during his college days, Jordan Spieth hasn't been as good at this golf course, but definitely has a winning track record around here. And then guys like Kevin Kisner, Ian Poulter used to absolutely dominate this sort of event. There's just those match play specialists that kind of buck all of the trends stat-wise and get the job done either way. So it's a week where you can use stats to maybe find some of those sleeper picks, but of course, anytime you get this volatile kind of format, it throws a lot of that to the wayside with those outliers. So it's a fun week, like I said, a little bit of a conundrum, much like the March Madness side when we're looking at a bracket. So should be a lot of fun to break down. Let's go ahead and get this thing started. All right, before we focus on the course specifically, just want to let you know about the format. So they've got 64 players, all split up into 16 groups. So the top 16 players were called like the one seeds, so on and so forth, 2, 3, and 4 for the next set of 16 players, and they go ahead and scramble them all up. So they randomize the groups, everybody is assigned into a pod, and they do group play for the first day or so. Actually, I believe for the first 3 days. And then afterwards, you have the top 16, so the winner in each group, that advance to the knockout stage, where then it's just head-to-head matches to see who moves on. And of course there, if it's tied throughout the first 18 holes of play, they go to sudden death. And then the first set of group matches, if there's a tie after the first 3 rounds, which can happen sometimes, then there'll be a sudden death playoff there too. And Sergio, a few years ago, ended up making the ace to move on. That was pretty cool. It's a fun format. So make sure to check out the bracket. If you're looking at the strategy side for DFS, we're going to cover that more extensively there later on. But that's how the match play is going to work this week. So Austin Country Club, it's an old-time design Pete Dye back in 1984. It's been renovated a few times. You had Rod Whitman come through in 2015, but it's a classical risk-reward style golf course, which of course is Pete Dye's MO. And here you have the risk-reward aspect off the tee. There's a bunch of water in play on the back nine, but on the front nine, it's all about setting up angles. In fact, the first 3-4 holes of this track are among the most difficult of all 18. So you get the slap in the face early, and if you're going to be conservative off the tee, well, you're going to have an even more difficult shot into the green. And of course, if you take that risky line off the tee and pull it off, you're going to have a great angle. In fact, probably pretty good birdie look on some of those difficult holes. So it's the perfect match play kind of course. In terms of your setup, it's a par 71, 7,108 yards, and the greens and fairways tend to be on the smaller side. So you have narrow fairways about 25 yards wide, and your greens are only about 5,500 square foot per green. So both of those well below the tour average. The one thing I'll say about missing fairways is that as long as you're not missing into a hazard or into a canyon here around Austin Country Club, you should be relatively okay. The rough is a Tifway Bermuda grass, but it's only 2 inches long. So as opposed to what you saw at the API, or of course the Valspar Championship last week, where we had 3.5, 4-inch rough, it's going to be about half that length, which is not non-existent. It's still going to impact players, right, that are missing those short stuff, but you're not going to look at those tufts of grass. It's not going to be like players are going to be hacking out of there to get it up to the green. It's more adding unpredictability, right? You'll get those flyer lies. You'll get a few that come out a little bit dead out of 2-inch Bermuda grass, but nothing to worry about all that much. The greens, on top of being small, also tend to run relatively fast, so the GCSAA has it listed at 12 on the stimp meter currently. It would not surprise me for those to go up throughout the week to perhaps get closer to 12.5 or even 13 by Saturday or Sunday. Also a 5-day event, right? So the event is going to be starting to be played there on Wednesday. So if the stimp meter is going to start at a 12 on Wednesday, well, by Sunday, it could be completely different. So pay attention to the weather. If it's going to be dry and windy over there in Texas, as it typically is this time of year, that'll probably go up throughout the week. A few other things to note. The green regulation average here is about tour average, despite having tiny greens, which for Texas, you might expect them to be a little bit firmer. I'm talking about the greens there, and a little bit harder to hit, but at this golf course, they do a really good job at keeping the greens receptive, and you'll see that they get slightly firmer throughout the week, but they're still going to be hit at right about the tour average there, despite only being 5,500 square foot. I have to say that when you miss the greens around Austin Country Club, you are penalized like most Pete Dye golf courses. You're going to have water in play on a lot of the back 9 holes, but even on the front 9, there's just so much undulation. These greens are tricky out there. When you're missing the green, it's going to be that true half shot, sometimes even a full shot penalty at times. So keep in mind that around the green, though it might not be utilized nearly as much at Austin Country Club as some of the more difficult tracks around the PGA Tour, you definitely have a priority on hitting the greens because when you're missing, even the best around the green players have a lot of trouble with it. So you'll see some of the around the green specialists, Poulter, Kisner, that have had a lot of success here show up there. I mean, even Scotty Scheffler, a few of the other champions over the last 3-4 years have had, I would say a semi-elite around the green play, but it's not a prerequisite for success. Particularly if you look at some of like the top 4 finishers, guys that have made it to the Elite 4. You've had some pretty shoddy around the green games, especially over the last few years. There are 110 bunkers on property, so just adding to the around the green play. A lot of times when you're missing these greens, you're going to be in the sand, so perhaps looking at sand saves is a way that you can get an advantage this week. And in terms of like the scoring average, now of course it's the match play format. If this was played under stroke play format, I would assume it'd be at least 2 under par. It's a relatively easy course, particularly on the back 9. The first 3-4 holes can be a little bit tough for sure. You're going to see some bogeys out there, but you got drivable par 4s. The par 5s are relatively short, so we want players that are going to be able to take advantage and make a bunch of birdies. So over the years, on top of a stout around the green play, iron play is probably the most important stat here. Like I said, you are punished heavily when you miss these greens. And on top of that, the guys that have been more aggressive have had a lot of success around this track. So we're looking for solid iron players, as we are pretty much every single week on tour, but perhaps ones that are a little bit more aggressive than some of their peers. All right, before we go hole by hole, just want to note that the greens here are a Poa trivialis overseeded on top of that Bermuda grass base. So much like we saw there at the Valspar, you saw at TPC Sawgrass, PGA West, over there at TPC Scottsdale, that hybrid kind of surface. So just wanted to note that, meant to go over that there at the beginning. But in terms of our hole by hole breakdown, let's go ahead and take a look at what these players are facing. So hole 1 is going to be a handshake, especially when it comes to these first 3-4 holes, because you'll see you get slapped in the face a few times here, but you can't miss with this tee shot. A lot of players are going to hit a 3-wood to put that priority on that accuracy. These fairway bunkers, you can still get to the green, but you're not going to have nearly as much control. And if you miss to the right, it's absolute jail. These tree-lined fairways tend to be especially dense, and the limbs are really hard to hit through. So a lot of times you have to play the ball along the ground if you get under these trees. Now you've had guys like Spieth bail out to the right over there over the years and still hit little running shots to 4 or 5 feet up there. So it's not impossible if you get over there to the right, but it adds a lot of difficulty to your shot and a lot of unknowns. So definitely a handshake if you can get the ball in the fairway, but if not, you're going to have to be really creative like Jordan Spieth has been over the years. Hole 2, this is the bear. So it's only 467 yards, but this tee shot is scary. Everything runs from right to left here down to a canyon. If you hit a shot that's drawing down this hill and conditions are a little bit firm and fast, you're going to see a lot of tee shots go into there and you'll have to take a penalty drop. If you miss to the right, it's not all that much better. This hill's even steeper than the fairway is. The rough, again, only about 2 inches long, but when you have that uphill, your side hill lie, you have that rough working against you. Hitting this green with this little, canyon outcropping there can be difficult too. You're going to see a lot of guys miss over the ledge over there, take another drop. You'll see guys that miss short, especially out of that rough, and end up having to take a drop the whole way back here in the fairway. It's a lot of landmines waiting to happen, which for match play is okay because it's only one hole lost if you get into that situation, but a lot of people will be conceding hole number 2 if they get into the penalty areas out there. Next shot, hole number 3, it's 439. Another tee shot where you have a severely undulated fairway and a green that's protected by a natural area. You can see this little rock wall there. If you get down in that, you're just praying and hoping that you have a shot onto the green. A lot of times you'll be in a little creek and essentially taking a penalty drop. It's another tricky hole. So like I said, it's a short track, but if you get a little bit offline, particularly on approach, you're going to be in a heap of trouble. Hole 4 is the same thing, 184 par 3, natural area to the short and to the right side. Hole 5 is 371. So as you can see, not a lot of length at this golf course. So there's not a prerequisite on being a bomber to have success here. Another hole where most players will take a 3-wood and then try and hit some sort of wedge onto the green and close. If you want to get a little bit more aggressive, you can push it to within 20-25 yards of the front of the green. Maybe a little bit further if you're a bomber and you have a tailwind, that sort of thing. But it's, for most players, just going to be 3-wood wedge. Hole 6 is 588. It's about your average length par 5, right? It's not short. I wouldn't classify it as a long par 5. Everyone should be able to reach into if they get it in the short stuff. I'll say a little bit of a shoot of a fairway, not the most wide fairway that you're going to have here on property, but the layup area is really wide. You can see it's like 40-50 yards wide there, which is wider than most of the fairways out here. So if you have to lay up, it should be a straightforward birdie look. Hole 7 is 202 yards on the longer end of the spectrum. This is one of the lesser penal holes, I'd say, because it doesn't really have that natural area, that penalty area in play. This bunker is going to get a lot of action, but one of the larger green complexes too. So 7, though it's 200 yards, actually isn't that bad. Hole 8 is listed as a par 5, but it's not a par 5. This will play as a par 4 for the Tour Pros. Perhaps they move up the tee boxes a little bit, but even so, this is actually a smaller green because, again, it's designed to be a par 5. But as a par 4, it's an absolute brute. Hole 9 is 476. It's also on the longer end of the spectrum here, but this one plays slightly downhill. So a lot of the Tour Pros will take a more aggressive line off the tee here and actually push it down even to the bottom of this hill, which is 340 yards, leaving a wedge into the green. But if you're offline, right, and you're not getting that rollout or that run on the downslope there, you can't see it on the overhead view there, but it's a severe downslope from the bottom side of the screen to the top end. If you end up in this like bunker, obviously you're not going to get rollout, but even if you miss in this rough to the left, you could be leaving yourself 200 yards over this little gorge to the green. So it's all dependent on tee shot on hole number 9, I would say. Could be easy, could be really difficult out there. Hole 10 is 400 yards. It's a dogleg from right to left. This fairway is one of the flatter ones on property. It's a driver wedge or a 3-wood wedge. It's another birdie look for most of the field. Hole 11, you have water protecting the front of this par 3, but it's 190 yards. Depending on pin location, could be tricky or could be a relatively straightforward birdie look too. Those back pins at hole number 11 aren't all that difficult. Hole 12 plays like 30 yards downhill. It's a crazy tee shot. It's like you're way up here on the mound and then you play down to the river down there. The whole way out there, 576 yards, but it plays a lot closer to like 520 yards. So the tee shots here are just going to go an absolute country mile. They have it out here where players would be hitting an iron off the tee. They're not only going to hit it 280, 300 yards, most of them, they're going to end up in this bunker because everything runs in the direction of this bunker. Some of the elite tier bombers, if they can keep it online, will even get close to this cart path up here. So that'd be like a 380-yard drive. If conditions are really firm, I suppose people could even get it past the cart path there, which would leave you like 180 yards into the green. Though you do have water to the left, you're going to have guys in boats over here having a good time over here below the bridge. This is, of course, the picture that you're going to see for Austin Country Club. If you look it up over there on Google, it's a picturesque hole and going to be a bunch of eagles at hole 12. Hole 13, speaking of eagles, drivable par 4. So you can see they have it set up for a little bit of a layup right now over there to the right. But depending on pin location, a lot of guys will go for this green. Now, the real decision point comes down to the pin. If it's an easy pin to get up and down from over the green, you'll see guys just blast a 3-wood at the green. You don't even need a driver, especially depending on wind location, or I should say wind direction out there. But if it's like a front right pin, you may see guys lay up because it's a relatively easy wedge, right? You can actually take out all of the water, make it a direct line. If it's a back right pin, you may see guys lay up a little bit more because the around the green shots to the back left or back right pins can be a little bit difficult. It's a lot of it's dependent on how they set it up and of course the wind direction. So it's a fun hole, no doubt. Could see eagles there as well. Hole 14 is 463. The water on the left isn't really in play unless you just hit a horrendous tee shot. You will see people bail out to the right, but it's I'd say one of the more simplistic holes here. There's not many trees in play, and it's a straightforward hole, which is kind of surprising here. Hole 7, so I'm getting ahead of myself. Hole 15 here is 437 yards. Another wide open, simple hole. So you have all those crazy holes, the downhill par 5, the drivable par 4, so on and so forth. And then a couple simple holes just to throw you off there. Hole 16 is a par 5. It's 565. It's definitely reachable in 2. I would say as long as you're in the fairway, I mean, you're going to have a mid to maybe long iron in your hand for some of the shorter hitters on tour. You will see a lot of guys in this bunker to the left, and you will see a lot of guys blocked out by this tree. So that's why I say should be reachable by a lot of the players in the field. It's just one of the tougher tee shots because of the wind. It's a little bit more exposed on this side of the property as opposed to the heavily tree-lined front 9. So if it's playing into the wind, maybe not as easy as it looks on paper. Hole 17, you have this natural area to the left that seemingly has a magnet on it. You can see there's definitely room out there. Now it's sloped down to the natural area, so you don't want to hit anything spinning off the green. But this area to the left, you hit the ball there way, way more than you'd expect. So you're going to see a lot of guys just blow up on this hole. This back left pin's devilish. Even this front right pin, you're going to see guys that just inexplicably pull it into the natural area. It's a fun hole to watch in person for sure. If you're out there, by the way, I've never been able to get out to Austin Country Club. That's where I would post up. Hole 17 looks like a lot of fun. Hole 18 is 371. It's a exciting finishing hole. Definitely going to be a lot of birdies here. It's I don't know, just positional par 4. You're not really going to try and drive this green because it plays slightly uphill. It's a birdie look for most of the field, and hopefully, if it comes down to the last hole, can be a little bit exciting. Now, I have to say, Robert McIntyre didn't get the message about this not being a drivable par 4, because if you guys remember a few years ago, he drove this green and hit it to like 2 feet here on the par 4. So it's possible if you have a tailwind to get it up close to the green. There's a little slope right here. It's like a little valley. So if you hit it on the down slope here, this is what Robert McIntyre did. He got it to like bounce like a trampoline off of it, which is like a 1 in a million type of bounce. And then it rolled the whole way up the hill and onto the green. So you're not going to see that happen very often, even if players try to bang a driver out there. Majority of them are just going to take a 3-wood off the tee and take their chances with a wedge. All right, guys, now that we've seen the golf course, let's go ahead and go through our key stats of the week to get an idea of the sort of metrics I'm looking at to go ahead and identify my top plays and bets. So at number 1, we've got shots gained approach, which shouldn't really surprise anybody because that's almost always our number 1 key stat. And at a Pete Dye golf course, that is going to be even more so the case. Kind of like we talked about off the hop, this is a track where when you miss on approach, you're going to be penalized heavily, whether it's missing into a canyon, missing into a water hazard, or into a sand bunker that's especially hard to get up and down out of. Pete Dye was a mastermind when it came to penalizing golfers around the green, and you're going to see that impact on pretty much every single hole. So shots gained approach important. One thing to note is that you're going to see a lot of the wedge kind of shots this week, especially on those short par 4s, and of course some of the longer irons. That 175 to 200 yard plus bucket is going to be a little bit more important this week than most. So whether you're looking at the wedges or some of those longer irons, perhaps consider those a little bit more. It's worth noting that the 125 to 150 yard range, and especially the 150 to 175 yard range, are slightly underutilized this week. So while we're putting more emphasis on a few of the other ranges, those two are perhaps a little bit less important here. At number 2, we've got shots gained putting on the Bermuda grass with overseeded greens, and specifically a Poitrivalis overseed, which you see at PGA West, you see it at TPC Sawgrass, you see it at Scottsdale, you also saw it last week there at the Copperhead course. So when you're looking at putting stats, don't only look at form, don't only look at the last 36, perhaps last 32 rounds, whatever your favorite is out there, but also consider how they've done over that recent stretch, because at this point, you've got a relatively large sample size. And if you take a look at last year's stats, Scottie Scheffler was popping all over the place when it came to those greens. So not a surprise when he came over here to Austin Country Club, another course that he's also extremely familiar with, right? Having been a local playing at the University of Texas, that he went out there and lit it up. So that's my number 2 key stat. I would say if you're trying to look for any sort of small edge to try and differentiate between two players, maybe it's their putting splits over the last 4 or 5 events. Taking a look at our key stat number 3, that is going to be birdie or better percentage. And going along with shots gained approach, you not only want players that are going to keep themselves out of trouble, but also put themselves in a position to score, because match play is all about making birdies, applying pressure to your opponent. Now, making pars all day can be a consistent way to go out there and keep up with your opponent. You're not going to get ahead. You're not going to apply pressure. And that's not how you win a match play tournament, right? By just outlasting the other player. And especially at a track that's only 7,100 yards and is gettable as Austin Country Club. So I want players on the opposite end of that spectrum that are going to go out there and try and, apply the dagger, right? Go out there and score at will, apply that pressure onto their opponents. And historically, some of the better match play players have been high birdie percentage players. And it's not all because of their iron play, going out there and sticking it close. Some of them are just the best putters in the world. I mean, Ian Poulter, Kevin Kisner. That's what we know them for, and the reason why they're so good in this kind of format is because they just make everything, right? They make all those 15, 20 footers and just completely frustrate their opponents. Whether you're getting it done with the flat stick or you're getting it done with your iron play, I want guys that are filling it up with that flat stick. Moving on, we have a few other stats I'm looking at. So first off would be match play record. And while you can look at the President's Cup or Ryder Cup, I would prefer to look at some of the stats specifically from this event, because we have, at least for some of the guys that have been here a few years, a relatively large sample size. For the guys where maybe they only have like 1-2 years here, maybe you consider their stats at the Ryder Cup or the President's Cup. But like I said, trying to focus on some of the Austin Country Club stuff, taking a look at a few stats like shots gained around the green at a Bermuda grass. So just trying to maybe look into that a little bit, especially with all of the difficulty around the green. You can take a look at sand saves. We talked about that a little bit earlier. You can take a look at short par 4 scoring. So from 350 to 400 yards, there's a bunch of those holes out there. And of course, taking a look at some of our comp courses, which we're going to hop into right now. Our number 1 comp course this week is going to be another Pete Dye specialty. It's PGA West, the Stadium course, which is the quote-unquote main course out there for the American Express. And it's a course very similar from the ball striking perspective. Neither one's all that long. You have a lot of wedges in hand. And though there are a few holes where you have those long irons in play, those mid irons are kind of neglected. So from the approach profile, pretty much spot on with what we have this week. A little bit more of a priority on, I would say, the accuracy over the distance component, which is also consistent across both golf courses. The same kind of greens, right? It's that Poitrivalis overseed on top of that Bermuda base layer. And you have, of course, the crossover from the architect perspective. So just a lot of similarities looking at that. Number 2, you've got Harbortown Golf Links, another Pete Dye golf course, the home of the RBC Heritage, and it's a short track, it's positional, it's all about setting up angles into the green. You get penalized for missing the fairways there by hitting it into marshes, into water hazards. It's canyons, it's sometimes water hazards around Austin Country Club, but once again, from the ball striking and architecture standpoint, a lot of similarities. The agronomy is different types of greens at both golf courses, but I'm still okay with looking at that. And number 3, we've got TPC Sawgrass, which I would say from the ball striking perspective is perhaps a little bit different than the other two, because water is just way more of a factor around the Players Championship. You also have the same kind of greens as what you have at PGA West and, of course, this week at Austin Country Club. And guys like Scottie Scheffler have had success at both courses, Kevin Kisner, of course. A lot of the shorter hitters that tend to have a lot of success at Austin Country Club have also found their success at TPC Sawgrass and a few of these other comps. So that's why I'm taking a look at them. You could consider a few of the other shorter tracks around tour. I mean, Sedgefield, like you could use that. It's a short positional track, kind of designed the same kind of way. You could look at Colonial Country Club. It's another one of those short positional types of tracks. If you just want to filter golf courses by 7,100 yards and shorter, I think that's a way that you can look at it. But of course, the ones where you have that priority on just setting up angles into greens are the ones that I'm taking a little bit more seriously this week. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for this week's course breakdown. Before you hopping out of here, first off, go ahead and comment down below who you've got winning this week. I know usually we ask for a winning score, but that's going to be completely non-existent out there. But go ahead, let me know who you've got, perhaps taking it down. I'm going to go ahead and take Jordan Spieth. That man has blown 2 leads over the last 3 weeks. Of course, he's my favorite player, so seeing those in person was heartbreaking to say the least. But he's going back to his college hometown, Austin, Texas. He's played this golf course thousands of times per his record, and he hasn't really broken through here yet. Hasn't had all that much success, but based on his form coming in, especially the confidence in that putter last week, I think maybe, just maybe, you'll see him get in to that Elite 8, that top 4, something like that. Either would be a solid performance, but the breakthrough for the win is what I'm looking for. So I'll go ahead and say Spieth. Go ahead and comment down below who you've got taking it down. And until next time, I appreciate all the support here on the channel. Make sure to smash that like button if you haven't already, if you guys found this video especially helpful. And also, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you aren't already one of the subscribers here. That way you don't miss all of the content I'm posting in the future. Not only do I post these course breakdowns, I also go through a lot of DFS content, whether it's some of my core plays for the week, some of the value plays that I think you might want to keep an eye on for some of those GPP or DFS contests on Draftkings. And we do live streams, which we cover every single week on Wednesday. We go over the week in general, where we talk about the weather, all of your questions going into the week. And then for Showdown in rounds 2 through 4, we also do live streams after each round. So we go through what to expect the next day, whether it's for Showdown, the single round slate, and of course, all of the props sites out there, right? There's a lot of player props dropping, whether it's Prize Picks, Underdog, a bunch of smaller sites starting to open up now on that side too. We touch on everything you need to know here on this channel. So if you aren't already subscribed and you want to make sure to catch all of that when it drops, that's the best thing I could recommend for you to do right now. So until next time, guys, best of luck, like I said, and let's get this money this week. It should be a fun one.